I'm planning a trip to Munich for the Oktoberfest Sevens Rugby Festival. So I thought it would be interesting to learn a bit more about beer culture in Germany. And I could not think of anyone better suited to talk about this topic than my friend Florian Leykauf. Florian hails from Bavaria, but currently works in Stellenbosch, so he has some understanding of the local market as well as that in his homeland. My name is Holger and this is Beer World. Welcome to the show, Florian.
Hi, Holger. How's it?
Good. So, you pretend to be a Bavarian, but you're actually from Hamburg. So let's start with the northerners. What kind of beer do we get in Germany besides... I mean, we know the big difference, for me at least, is the size of the glass, isn't it?
It's very much true. The further south you get, the bigger the glasses are.
and why would you say that is?
Oh, that's a very good question. No, not sure. I mean, we talked about many things in earlier talks when we said before, and in general, there's a north-south border within the country, which shows in many aspects, such as the former German states before Germany was a country, like Prussia, which dominated the north and was led by Calvinists by then, and the south, where Bavaria, just before Germany existed, was a own country for centuries, and centuries before the Romans even. So I think coming from different German countries, uniting one country is one of the reasons for the splits and the habits. So I'm just guessing the Southerners are more influenced by cultures from south of the Alps even, where the Northerners have a bigger influx from Scandinavia and so on.
I mean, even in the Netherlands, you get the divide of the small glasses and the beautiful glasses in Belgium, I guess. So, you growing up in Munich, I mean, the most important thing, I think, is that you drink local beer. You don't drink beer from far away.
It's very much true. It's not even a question if you drink a local beer or not. It's rather the question, which local brand do you drink? Mm-hmm. And it's also not so much about beer styles as we call it das Helle, which is probably close to a lager, is the one and only beer style which probably is good for 85% to 90% of beer consumption, is Helles beer, where Helles beer originated from the classical Pilsner style. Mm-hmm. So it's fairly young if you look into beer history, but it dominates for a long time already the Bavarian beer market.
Yeah, and is that a obergärig or untergärig? Is it an ale or a lager?
That's a lager.
Is it a lager?
That's the closest, I would say, if you translate it to a lager. Sister or brother of the Pilsner, less bitter usually. That's why some in the north of Germany regard it, of course falsely regarded, as a lower quality because hops are expensive. But remember where the hops grow, it's in Bavaria.
Yeah.
So it's careful selection of the best here.
Yeah.
It's also in its lighter hopped style, it matches the bigger serving units. Half a liter to a liter are the common sizes, and you can really describe it as easy drinking. You can drink a few of this without getting a bitter tongue too soon.
And that's typically what you would drink at the Oktoberfest.
That's Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest gets its own batch of beer exclusively for Oktoberfest. It's slightly stronger.
Oh, really?
So many who are not aware of this fact and think they can drink Bavarian beer and count in the same numbers, they got a surprise at Oktoberfest, wondering what's happening with them because the effect is also stronger.
So we definitely planning to meet up at the Oktoberfest this year. Hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, and what is the brand that you drink when you're at home?
Well, it changes, huh? The more you learn
Not at
about
home
beer,
in Stellenbosch, but
yeah.
in Munich.
When I visit Munich, that changes now. In the meantime, I would just guess that this craft beer movement has also an influx on me, broadening the horizon of beer knowledge and looking into different ways of making beer. Where, as I grew up and was of legal age to drink beer, it was...
What is that, 12?
Legally, that's 16 years old in Bavaria.
Yeah.
And by that age, it was only Augustina beer from Munich, oldest Munich brewery from 1328. Augustina, such as Paulaner, comes from the monks with the same name, the Paulaner monks, the Augustina monks, etc. Who made beer big in our area.
And I just want to point out, Florian doesn't have notes, so he knows that 1382 is the year without me prompting it or rehearsing it.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Is
that pride?
I would say that's the best form of marketing they ever had. Augustina Brewery makes zero advertisement.
Okay.
Is by far the number one consumed beer in Munich. Focuses strongly on the Munich market. Did never, like Erding or other brands, try to expand, but is in such a high demand that, well, it's sad to still malt their own barley and things like that. But I heard that their capacities are not enough anymore. They have such high demand. Of course, you find it in Berlin and Hamburg now. They also found out it's a lecker beer.
Okay, and then do you know where the brewery is in the city?
Yeah, it's in the inner city. The quarter of town is called West End. No need to translate it. It's both understandable in English and German. It's very, very much in the center, which was the outskirts of Munich when they opened. There was the Galgenberg, the Gallow Hill, where they hanged people in that times, and you see that was more on the outskirts, but now it's in the middle of the city, very centric, and all the people living around the Augustina Brewery, they smell the barley, they smell the malts, they smell the hops when the brewery brews. There's still also Löwenbräu and Spaten Brewery, which is part of AB InBev by now. They also have a facility, but they try to move out of the city like Paulaner did now, within the city limits to the edge to get their own infrastructure for the shipping of the beer.
And tell us a little bit. I mean, you can start drinking when you're 16. How does that work? I mean, it's just normal.
It's legal age for light alcoholic beverages. I'm not very much sure if that's also fine to drink wine at that age. I know it for a fact in beer because when we were 16, we never thought about wine. It was only important when we are finally allowed to drink beer. And obviously you start in moderate quantities, and Bavaria is still very much traditional, even though Munich is a huge city. But you grow up with tradition and you limit yourself, or most people limit themselves, especially in the beginning, and drink really moderate. It's more for having the first beer experiences.
And tell us a little bit about growing up in Munich. Where did you went to school in Munich? Everything happened there?
Yeah.
And then the beer experience, what's a typical experience? I mean, we know the Englische Garten, we know Hofbrauhaus, and we know the Wiesen with the Oktoberfest. But those are tourist attractions. What would be your experience of beer?
Well, I can say as a person growing up in Munich and surroundings, you have very much the same experiences. You just have more opportunities, so more variations of those experiences. It's in some families tradition that you get a photo when you're a young kid with a beer glass in hand and you pretend to drink beer just to have this photo. So in early ages, you get a connection. If you drink it or not, you get a connection to the product. And then I heard about some grandmothers who would give their grandchildren one sip of beer after the dinner, and then the grandchildren would ask, Oma, may I go to bed, please? So it's fairly integrated in the traditions of Bavaria. Again, in really moderate use. I think that's important to underline.
Yeah.
But it's deep-rooted, so you grow up with it, and then any traditional feuerwehrfest.
Festival, yeah.
It's a firefighters festival, but it's more like a reason to get together once a month. Is connected to beer, and all sort of local festivals are connected to beer. And we have also one branch of the family who lives not in Oberbayern, but Mittelfranken, which is a part of Bayern, Bavaria. And there the village is called a Markt, which means a market. And that means that village had the market right. And now the, say, upper tiers of that village, of the society, on that festival day, when the merchants came from other villages to present their goods or offer their duties, people like the village leaders, let's say, also in my family, they had to pay the visitors beer. So when the merchants arrived to the market, people like my, great-grandfather probably and upwards, they had to pay the visitors 1 mass, which is 1 liter of beer. So I cannot imagine a place where beer is more integrated.
I mean, one of the memories that I've got is that if you watch the workers at their tea break, they drink a can of beer. I mean, that sounds like it's, even today, is it still allowed, or is it?
It's of course not allowed, but it's common practice. In very traditional companies, until I would say 5-6 years ago, it was allowed that the worker drinks up to 2 light beers for lunch break, or 1 Weiss beer, let's say, for lunch break. With the globalized world, this is disappearing clearly. However, on the construction sites, it's more than you should still common practice.
And the other beer styles, obviously we think everybody in Munich drinks Weiss beer.
Yeah, that's maybe because Weiss beer comes from Munich, as it is. It's a signature style of beer from the city of Munich. It's very popular. It never reached the volumes of Helles because you cannot drink as many Weiss beers as you can drink Helles. The Helle, the lager style, is more easygoing, and after 2, maximum 3 Weiss, you probably are saturated.
Yeah.
And that's the reason.
So you also don't get that at the Oktoberfest because they have a special beer then?
Yeah, I mean, at Oktoberfest, you get anything from Sprites, water, sparkling water.
Yeah.
You by now get caipirinhas in some locations. So the Oktoberfest is a very international event, and therefore you can drink a bottle of champagne in some tents.
Okay.
That's let's say evolving traditions.
Yeah. Okay.
But we have dunkles beer as well, a dark beer. Also, the Weiss beer can be a dark Weiss beer. There's so many specialty beers in Bavaria. There's thousands of small breweries. And as there's thousands of breweries, there's hundreds of specialty beers, which I'm not aware of, like smoky beers, etc., etc.
And the Urbock and...
Yeah, seasonal beers like Urbock, Maibock, Märzen, anything seasonal normally means more alcohol in beer in Bavaria.
Another reason. And I mean, are they still keeping to those tradition that they keep them seasonal for a reason?
Yes.
So that makes it special, I guess.
Yeah, it's really still seasonal. Of course, they could produce it around the year, but as it's rooted in the traditions again, you drink the Doppelbock, which is called Fastenbier, the beer to feast, which might be a bit misleading.
Not to feast, to fast.
To fast.
Yeah.
To fast. It's really rich beer, but it's really to replace food in that period. And the story of the beer goes that the monks in Munich, it was the Paulaner monks by that time, they were used to beer. Beer was a stable component of the daily diet, and so they had to think about something. How can we stop eating or eat very little during these around about 6 weeks? And obviously their solution was easy. Let's drink more beer and make it more rich. So they added more malts to the recipe. I think after 2 Doppelbock beer you're saturated. And what they did then is they sent it to the Pope, because only the Pope could allow them to drink that, because it had quite of a kick already that time, like it still has. So they sent it over the Alps, but that was in times where there was no refrigeration and no stabilization of beers and whatsoever. So the beer turned sour on the way to Rome. And the Pope smelled it and said, yeah, that's allowed. That's nothing evil. If they want to drink it, let them. And since then it was allowed to drink this very strong beer during the fast.
Yeah, and that's normally the period before Easter, isn't it?
That's between, that's before Easter, and it's normally 6 weeks, 6 weekends. It starts with Carnival.
Yeah.
Carnivale means stop eating meat, and that's what you're supposed to do in that time.
Yeah. And then instead of fasting food, instead of fasting alcohol like we often do, we just stop eating and just drink heavy, strong beers.
But that, in today, is not possible anymore. So many people do the same with alcohol now.
Yeah.
Traditions, that's global traditions.
Yeah. And in how much normal Pilsner or lager do you see in Munich?
Well, it exists.
For the visitors.
Probably because the company, or now you can say the company, AB InBev, has a good sales force.
Yeah.
They place it. And there are absolutely some good Pilsners in that portfolio. Like you get Chick Pilsner sometimes in the shelves. For those who like it, the German Pilsners like Beck's or any other German beers. You get Belgian beers. I mean, by now it's a really international offering in stores that you also might find here that specialize in that categories. But you'd never find a Budweiser from the US, only from Czech.
Only the original one, yeah. I remember that. They wouldn't. It's not Reinheitsgebot, and then you don't let it in.
Yeah,
that just doesn't sell.
That's another story. The Reinheitsgebot. It's similar with the gin craze in former times when people just tried to hide bad quality by adding flavors. Like some brewers might add some cherry flavor to a beer that had some funny notes. And because it was going wild, one of the reasons was because that was going wild, they invented Reinheitsgebot and said that's the only allowed ingredients just to secure the quality standard. It's like a GMP or HACCP, and nowadays that was their measure of regulation. We get Corona beer, which is clearly not Reinheitsgebot, it's with Mais. But there's just no demand for Budweiser. It's not our beer style. Even though it's Germans, Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're German immigrants.
Yeah.
I mean, all over the world, Tsingtao is also German, isn't it?
It is,
So I think that the Germans have certainly influenced the brewing industry worldwide. And going a bit further out of Munich now, I mean, we had a nice discussion about drinking local, and I think I saw that again when you came to visit Hillcrest Tops. You said, which is the local beer, where I think in countries like ours, we always want to experience things from afar. You want to drink what's local. And I think it's important, especially with a craft beer, that you support your local beer, and you obviously do that in Munich, and it's a nice German tradition to support the local beers. And if you're going, I mean, if you travel, you obviously ask for the local beer. You don't then insist on drinking Augustiner when you're in Hamburg.
Yeah, that's also a way to understand the people. Like you say, the sizes of the beer are different, let's say in Cologne or Hamburg. And then it's also another way of drinking beer, and it comes with a whole cultural environment. Yeah. So I think if you want to understand something about the local culture, drink the local beer the way the locals do. And it also gives the local breweries, especially where there's no Reinheitsgebot, it gives them a fantastic opportunity to show what they can source product-wise and make a statement about their surroundings.
And I mean, you've been in South Africa for a couple of years now. Have you picked up anything in Munich about craft beer the way we have seen it in the Cape and now in the rest of the country?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as with all the global trends, it all started probably in California. That's where I saw the first craft beers, and had big question marks in my face. What are you doing to beer, and why is there a flat tire on the label? What does it mean now? And by now, that's, as I heard, a successful brand over there, and that's just came out of being curious. And that wave even hit Bavaria and its traditions, where the young brewmasters or younger brewmasters, they studied in the classical Weinstefan University north of Munich. Then they maybe added an apprenticeship in one of the local breweries to get the real craftsmanship. And that's something where they stand out. They get the real craftsmanship. They have to do that for 3 years, plus their studies, to become a real accepted brewmaster.
So studies at the university, not
It's probably 3 years at the university, depending on your courses, and another 3 years apprenticeship. So you invest 6 years of your life in learning how to make beer before you start. But they also travel, and they also seen that you can do more with beer than just 3 ingredients. And let's say they expand the limits of Reinheitsgebot at the moment as far as you can with different kinds of hops and hop mixtures. And you have this craft beer, even in Munich, there's craft beer festivals. So it's the same like here. It's just different. In the US, there was a need for craft beer because the average beer quality was very average. And where in Munich or all of Germany, beer quality was always very good. And craft beer is just now adding another sort of style to the basket. Yeah.
And I mean, the Germans are also experimenting with hops, and I mean the Mandarino hops, which I think Wolfgang uses to brew his IPA at CBC. That is the hops from Germany. It's not from the west coast of the USA or somewhere.
Yeah, that's. I mean, as far as I know, there's different hop growing regions in the world, but those Hallertau hops, they have a really big demand, and they're generating new plantations. It's a very limited space they have, but in their space they're enlarging, and it seems to be a business worthwhile when you listen to those hop farmers there in the region. They sound quite happy.
Yeah. Okay. And the rest of Germany, I mean, the different styles. We obviously got in Bamberg, there's a lot of Rauchbier, and Cologne, there's interesting beers in Cologne as well.
Yeah, it's again funny to see how you have a really good understanding about different beer styles in Germany, where the average person like me in Munich never thinks about other beer styles in Germany. There's purely no need for it.
Yeah.
Obviously, as you travel, maybe for holiday or for your business trips, as said, you try new beers, and you have in Cologne, you have Obergäriges beer like the Kölsch, which is then more closely related to a Weissbier actually than a lager, which is consumed in very small portions and mostly also more chilled than the beers.
Small glasses,
Small glasses, more chilled than Bavarian beer. So it's more easygoing, and then to have apparently big wars between Kölsch beer and the neighbor city Düsseldorf Alt, where for somebody from Bavaria it's not clear to see what the argument is, but,
But they can see that.
it's local pride. It's really what it boils down. And where to the north, it's really Pilsner style. I mean, all the traditional beer brands in the north, they are more bitter, more hoppy, really dry in style. You can, and it's Becks from Bremen, or they're named after the cities like Flensburg, which are very common brands, or Jever is another name of a city actually. Brands like this also consumed in smaller classes. They are traditionally with a class of corn schnapps, which is the German sibling between vodka and whiskey, you can say, style-wise. So that's what you don't do, for example, in Bavaria. Don't drink a shooter with your beer. And there they do it with every round they order. They order corn and a beer, and that works on you quite quickly if you're not used to it.
Certainly, I worked in Leipzig after, when was it, in the 90s, and these guys, every beer there was a Kurze, and I kept falling asleep, and I couldn't understand why I kept falling asleep. Obviously I did, but I mean, there was no end to those, and it was probably more than one with each beer.
Yeah.
The closer they got to the East Bloc countries, eh?
Yeah. So their beer tradition is again different. However, if you look a bit in beer history in Germany, successful breweries in Hamburg were all of a sudden called Bavaria. And why? Because the Bavarian beer styles became so attractive in the rest of the world, especially the idea of Helles beer, making a pils more palatable, more easy drinking, but still rich of flavor. That was, I think, making an international success, and there's quite a few Bavaria breweries around the world.
In Holland, there used to be one where I obviously worked in South Africa.
Yeah.
I think in South America there's a big one called Bavaria.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously, but the Pilsner is the one that has dominated the world, I guess, or the lager, which is also a traditional German style, I guess, and the origin might be next door, but certainly, I think, developed by the Germans. And I mean, you can not being a northerner, I mean, would you even drink a Pilsner?
Yes, of course.
Of course, yeah.
As a beer lover, there is an opportunity for every beer.
Yeah.
I might even once a year drink a Guinness, just because I feel like it. So, and sometimes a Pils, and especially that smaller portion of Pils, can be something really refreshing. Definitely.
Okay, and traveling to Bavaria, what do the beer fans have to visit?
Yeah, I would say you just depends where you are. You just ask for the very next local brewery, as there is one every, let's say, 5 villages. There's a brewery, and they will have their version of the common beers, such as Weiss beers and Helles and Bock beers specialties. And then the best way to really experience beer is to look for a traditional festival on the countryside that basically consists of one big beer tent, a band which is here called Umpa Band, with traditional music and traditional foods, of course. Food is always excellent to have balance with the beer. And then there might be some surrounding offers for the children or not. But there you can understand the best way beer is consumed. It's also not this big party like Oktoberfest. It's more get-together. And it's really friendly. That defines the Bavarian beer culture. No matter to which table or bench you're coming, there will be always space for you. As long anything below 5 people on one bench, there still can be space made up to 7 people on one bench. And especially if you're a foreigner, you get welcomed and get introduced quite quickly to the local way of beer drinking. After that, you're an expert.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about beer garden culture, because that's not really something we understand, I think. I mean, first of all, it's self-service, isn't it?
Yeah, the beer garden culture, it's rooted in the brewery's need to sell beer quickly. So that demand was created by the producer. Yeah. But it tuned in with the traditions, I think. It was accepted very quickly. Yeah. So it comes from the old days again, where there was not proper refrigeration, where we got our ice from a little sidearm of the River Isar to store the beer cool. There was no fridge around, there was no freezer. So refrigeration was very limited, and then they brewed the beer, and after beer brewing, it needed to be consumed as soon as possible. So they opened this, what you can say, restaurants very next to the breweries, and the people were basically sitting above the beer. The beer was cellared below the beer garden to keep the temperature constant and as chilled as possible. And on top, they just added some chairs and furniture so people could sit, and they got the beer directly from the beer cellar. And what's a very famous thing for beer garden, or a signature thing for beer garden, is Kastanienbaum. What's that in English? Yeah. That tree grows big green leaves. The reason why they planted it is because it doesn't root very deep. So the roots don't go in the beer cellar. So the surface, having the benches and the big 1 liter glasses of beer and the castanien trees, now defines the beer garden, but it all has practical reasons. If you fill directly from the big barrel, 1 liter is far more easy to pour than a 200 milliliter or 250 milliliter glass, which even exists in Munich. If you're really traditional, you can order a quartal, and only if you order a quartal, the waitress won't be angry with you. If you order a small beer, they will look at you and shake their head.
So you have to,
you have to understand the lingo in order to get what you want.
Yeah.
So the beer garden, you come mostly with the public transport, which is really convenient. And before there was public transport, you just walked there. You had more time. Today you still can take the bicycle. So it's always avoiding the car, because when you go to the beer garden, you know you're going to drink beer, and probably not just one. And another thing is you're allowed to bring your own food. So it's actually designed for drinking beer and include as many people as possible for that experience. You don't need to pay a waitress. You don't need to pay a chef in the kitchen. You just gotta pay the guy who pours the beer basically into the glasses and one that rinses them, and you can make a beer garden. So it's a cheap way of selling beer, and that is including everybody who wants to come, and that again reflects to the cultural side, where you come to the table, everybody is welcome. It just fits the culture. However, today there are sections where you can order, where you don't have to get up, and there's also full food offerings of all the traditional dishes. Some people might come with their car and drink alcohol-free beer, so things are changing, but it's the most common thing to do on a sunny day, to grab the bicycle and meet your friends in the beer garden.
And you still do that? I mean, that's still a big tradition.
Yes. Okay. That's you just wait for that sunny day. I mean, it's not South Africa. You wait for your sunny days. And as soon as the weather seems to be quite all right, you chat to your friends and you just decide over which beer garden you're meeting at.
And what is some interesting ones to visit in Munich?
Well, it's as a local, but more especially as a visitor, I would say go to the bigger ones. Go to Hirschgarten, which is close to the castle of Nymphenburg in town. It's 8,000-seater. Just to get an experience, see 8,000 people drinking beer. I think you don't see it very often on this planet.
No.
And the second biggest one is the most beautiful one. It's called Chinesischer Turm, Chinese Tower. There's a little pagode in the Englischer Garten, very much centric in the city. And it's a 7,000-seater, so you still meet quite some people. Where the Hirschgarten is mostly visited by locals. The Chinesischer Turm, the Chinese Tower, is a very international beer garden. You meet the whole world there. Yeah. The band is playing in the tower, and then you can have a walk in the garden, which is the biggest inner city park in the world, actually. Can have a walk after there and get rid of some of the beer effects.
Yeah, interesting, eh? And now you're working for a distillery. How did that come about?
Yeah, that's purely by choice. And it's fairly much related to drinks and to food and to good things to be enjoyed. And as I'm a trained chef, and I worked in different parts of the world as a chef, I was always out for the best possible joy you can have with something you can eat or drink. It's if you're fortunate, you probably can do that without working, but working in a related industry gives you the opportunity to see different ways of enjoying all over the world, and where the food is one thing, the drinks is the other half of the experience, because it's always both together. And yeah, I mean, after studies, I wanted to see a vineyard, and that vineyard happened to be in South Africa, and wine is obviously a wonderful product. And it was more an incident that I encountered spirits when the distillery in Stellenbosch opened. It had nothing to do with gin. It was distilling the grape skins and other materials for grappa and some other specialty products. And none of them were on my list of things I would ever buy or consume. However, as a chef, I got used to drinking gin, because when you finish your 16, 17-hour workday, there's only one place that's open, and that's the bar. And the bartender actually is the only one who understands you as a chef, because he thinks the same way about flavors, just in a liquid form. Mm-hmm. And then you begin to experience the spirit as another kind of ingredient. And yeah, when there was the opportunity to possibly make gin here in South Africa, I was asked if I could imagine it, and it took me less than a week to decide for yes, seeing the incredible ingredients that grow here, especially in the Western Cape, with all the herbs. Any Sunday walk you make outside, you can rub the leaves of the bushes and just smell what they contain. And there's so much undiscovered ingredients here that it seems to be a never-ending journey when it comes to distilling anything with herbs like a gin is. And let's see what else comes next.
Mm-hmm. And how big is gin in Germany?
Yeah, it's the spirit to drink.
Really? Okay.
Of course, whiskey is also very
Bacardi
strong.
Cola.
Bacardi Cola probably is also a good seller, just guessing here. But if it comes to your premium spirits, it's still whiskey. Rum is super niche, but bigger than here. And then gin. There's hundreds of gin distilleries and hundreds of brands in that segment, and they all sell their products. And it's more opening up rather than some closing. It's a really dynamic market over there in Germany, such as in Spain, such as in the UK, and the smaller countries like Belgium and the Netherlands, and parts of Italy. And that's the countries I just named, is the countries where the gin originates from, as we have it today. So it's not a big surprise that it's becoming popular again in those countries.
Yeah. And you exporting a lot of gin to back home from Stellenbosch?
Depends what you define a lot. I mean,
most of your gin goes...
Still a small distillery.
Yeah.
Most of the gin we sell in South Africa.
Okay.
I think the weather is also the best for drinking G&Ts. Quite any day of the year is inviting. Yeah. And obviously there's a big demand also overseas for more foreign gins, as the market is flooded with thousands of brands. The more foreign, the better. So it's two trends. It's the more local, like a gin from Munich in Munich, distilled with hops. So also rooted in the beer culture again. Or you have something very exotic to compete the main brands from your big spirits companies. So something South African or African distilled in a traditional way has a very big potential overseas there, especially as there's so many tourists coming to South Africa, associating something positive and associating good food, good wine, good spirits with this country.
Okay, and quickly talk us through your gin. You've got 3 gins: 100% juniper berry, citrus infusion, and African botanicals. You said it's a London dry gin, or is it a dry gin?
That can be quite confusing nowadays with the terms, as the London dry style, in my opinion, has the same reason to exist as the Reinheitsgebot in beer has. It was used as a measure, as a quality standard to define gins. And you mentioned the word craft gins, and if you want to define something at craft, in my opinion, it should contain some craftsmanship. It's not just because you distill less or you make another recipe. It's not craft. You can call yourself craft, but craft comes from craftsmanship, and that implements that you know what you're doing, that you use the right procedures, and that you have a broad understanding of the category as such, and then you will find out how to name your product as well, because you know the different styles. For example, if you add anything sweet to your gin after distillation, you should call it an Old Tom gin when it has that sweet touch on the palate. For some gin categories, there is a content of sugar allowed, not in the London dry gin. That's where the word dry comes from. And London dry gin simply means that there's no sugar and everything is distilled, and everything is distilled together. And then again, that has more historical reasons than reasons of production, because our other 2 gins are also distilled gins, but not all the ingredients get distilled at the same time. And that again has to do with craftsmanship. So if you look even in your ultra premium brands from the big competition, from your international players, their products do actually the same, because they also figured out it's a more advanced way of distillation. And you can now state the most prominent names besides your Tanquerays and your Bombays. They're not London Dry, because they distill in separate runs different sort of ingredients that need different temperatures, that need different macerations, etc., etc. And this is where the knowledge about ingredients comes in to achieve your goal in the spirit. And this is where the craft is the chance. It's a very personal product. For example, in our bottles you see a signature. It says Rolf Zeitvogel, Master Distiller. And what you get in this bottle is the way he, as a master distiller and originator of that idea, envisions the gin to be. It reflects the way he likes to drink it. That means that it's a more personalized product. It also means you can never reach it's unlikely to reach the heights of a Tanqueray gin, because if it's more personalized, it's also more niche. It's not as common anymore. So here with 100% juniper gin, yes, you have a London Dry gin, but it's even not written on the label, because it really doesn't matter. It's very confusing. Some people still think it must be from London. Some then name the gins Cape Dry or whatever Dry or Munich Dry, you name it. California Dry, doesn't matter. But that naming is not an existing guideline anymore, because there's also many producers who decide over their own styles and then place it in the same shelf like the dry gins. I think this is maybe room for potential, like they have it in wine or beer, to improve information for the gin lovers. However, as it's so personalized, you rather buy the spirit from one person or a group of people, and you buy their idea how the product should be. So the 100% juniper gin is only distilled with juniper berries, and many people say, oh yeah, isn't that the original gin? And yeah, well, it's sort of that. It comes from that idea. But then again, original gin, as soon as people could afford spices, they used additional spices purely to hide sharp alcohols and bad alcohol qualities. So now if you go the way around again, the way backwards, and you only use juniper, you got to make sure you work with really smooth and essential oil-rich ingredients, so you have enough flavor in the product, and B, you still have a smooth gin. Like all these three gins are so smooth you can drink them neat if you want. Which again, I come to the master distiller. The master distiller comes from the Black Forest of Germany, where they drink fruit schnapps, fruit spirits, and they drink them only neat. They never mix them. So in his understanding of a spirit, he created a gin in a way that the gin is according to those quality standards. It must taste like the ingredients stated. It must be smooth. It mustn't give you a headache the next day, meaning a clear spirit, a clean spirit. And that's where you see how important the people are in this segment. And I know Rolf is not a big fan of the word craft, because many people might misuse that term in order to get more money for their product. Then again, we haven't found a much better word. Can say artisanal or whatsoever.
Yeah, or small batch, I guess.
The small batch, still, if you say craft's probably the most understandable term.
And it's the same problem with beer, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's where it fairly relates to beer. And some distillers say, don't put me in the same category like craft beer for that very reason. However, I think in the gin side, we have the same structures like in the craft beer, therefore. And we have then the citrus infusion gin. And what happens there is the citrus and the juniper are two different distillations and macerations as well. Purely because the citrus oil from the peel has another need in distillation than the juniper berry has. And also, it's a natural component. It's if the juniper, now you have lemons, you have oranges, and during the season, those ingredients change their flavor profiles. So, do you want to have a seasonal gin each time you bottle, or do you have an idea of a gin, like the citrus infusion gin, where you say it always is orangey, almost sweet in the nose, and then it gives you a fruity zestiness on the palate. It's a refreshing experience. And that is a fairly precise idea. We have our own terms how we describe that then internally, which might be misleading because, like the sommeliers talk of candy floss and whatsoever. We in production have similar terms to describe it. That is a promise we make. Anytime we bottle the spirit, it has this profile because it's our very idea of how the spirit should be. Now, if I would make this London Dry and by the same recipe distill it all the time, you would have 12 different recipes a year. And then you're not sure what you're getting when you open the bottle. And that is the strength of the small batch. We distill into small buckets. We can then fill the small buckets into bigger buckets and then finally make the blend. So we have a really precise control over our recipe, and yet everything is distilled. So this is where the strength is in comparison to continuous distillation that might make you Gilbey's gin, which is a sound product, but the very end, the other side of gin production. And then with the African botanicals, with 7 ingredients plus water 8 plus alcohol 9, that gets even more tricky to always get the same flavor profile in the bottle. Again, the buchu grows with the water, it grows with the sun, and always comes out different. So that again, it's a more precise attempt not to make it London Dry, but everything distilled by its own, and then make your vision in the bottle. And it's proven to be fairly successful. Such are brands like Hendrix or Rangpur Gin from Tanqueray, to name the big guys. They do the same, and it's very successful. It's craftsmanship.
And where can they find out more about these? This is 333.co.za.
Yeah.
And you're based in Stellenbosch on the Blauwklippen estate.
Yeah, exactly.
And are you open for visitors there?
Yeah, it's, you can find out about the gin on 333.co.za. We are fortunate to have a spirits room at the vineyard. At Blauwklippen, there's a spirits room where you can come 7 days a week, and there's always somebody open for questions who makes a guided gin tasting with you. Even our name relates to the vineyard. When we launched our distillery, launched our gins, it was the 333rd anniversary of the vineyards, and 333, it's a 333. It's a lucky number.
I forgot to ask about that. And then in your gin room or your spirit room, it's better to come on a bicycle, eh? Back in Munich.
You can have a professional tasting, like you can have on the wine side. You can have a professional tasting on the spirit side, and then take the bottle home. In Stellenbosch, we have great Uber connectivity. It's short distances, or you find the designated driver.
Yeah. And what else is on the farm? There's a vineyard in a hotel, eh?
There's a vineyard, which also, where Rolf also is the manager. So here comes again the product side in place. He has many specialties. Like we do have 3 recipes for the gin. He has more than one version of a, let's say, Zinfandel wine or a Malbec wine. He always thinks out of the box, so there's many specialties you can taste on the wine side. We have brandy as well. We do offer some of the grappas for those enthusiasts that appreciate a grappa. We barrel age them as well. We make pear spirits, which are soon on the shelf again.
Which we tried the other day.
We had a try of a dry pear spirit, classical European style, from the cultivar Williams. And then we also now will make a sweetened version, which you had the other night. And yeah, watch the space. It's gonna be there soon. It's also who we are. The distillery is open since 2012 already. So we're not learning how to distill. There's actually a rich basket of spirits that we mastered already.
Okay. Florian, thank you for joining us today, and we really look forward to seeing you in Munich at the Oktoberfest, and you will show us or take us to one of the beer gardens. I think that will be the highlight. Thank you.
Absolutely. Cheers, Holger.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to our stories here online. In the show notes, you will also find a link where you can subscribe to become part of our community and be notified when we upload our latest content.